Same old man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Oh, welcome to episode 636 for May 11th, 2025, and I'm Jada Duran.
And I'm Brennan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for this week's show. We hope everyone had a great Mother's Day weekend.
Absolutely.
Celebrating all the great moms out there. We had a great time. We had our first pool session of the season.
Oh, wow.
In which my little one, who is now 2 years old, has decided he is now Michael Phelps and has taken to the water like a fish.
Wow, you live in Florida. I'm surprised it took this long to have a swimming session now.
Well, you know, it wasn't from a lack of opportunity. It's more so, do you really want to... It depends on if you have a heated pool or not. The one that we have access to is not heated.
Okay.
So the sun certainly makes it warm enough above the surface to want to get in the pool. The water depends on how, how you can acclimate to
Depends on how you like it. Yeah.
Water.
How do you take your water in Florida?
These days I've gotten soft. For sure. 10 years ago when I first moved here, I could have gotten into the pool any time of the year, really.
Okay.
February?
Okay.
Sure. I'll get in. These days...
Like a February pool in Michigan, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all my Michiganders out there will know this. I mean, May, June, even July, as hot as it can get at times, you get into those lake waters, pretty frigid still. It's frigid.
Absolutely, yeah. I know that for sure.
Yeah. Those lake waters, depending on the size of the lake, might get warm-ish in August during the dog days of summer. That's about it.
So basically, you had no filter at one point. Your version of ice fishing would be to just dive in and collect as many fish as you can.
My very first trip to South Florida, when I first started dating Brandy, it was over New Year's. Okay. And we went down to the beach, and I absolutely got into the ocean water. It was me and about 4 other Canadians that were willing to get into the water. This was New Year's Day. And all the locals were like, you guys are crazy. That's how you know you're from out of town, is that it's January 1st and you're in the ocean. I don't do that anymore. That's not
Brandy
me.
must have thought, I have a keeper. This is a unique fella right here. I'm not letting him go.
So, at any rate, it is pool season, at least here in South Florida. And the water was really nice.
Yeah, that's great.
So, it was great to get in. The little one loves the water, loves jumping into the pool. So, you have to be on your toes at all the time. He just started swimming lessons.
Okay.
Last week. So he's had 2 sessions.
Nice.
So we're still working through that. But at any rate, that's how we celebrated Mother's Day. I hope everyone else had a great Mother's Day as well.
That's excellent. Yeah. Happy Mother's Day indeed to my mom as well, who I would not be the man I am today if not for her influence. So I have to give her a lot of appreciation and love for that. And also, happy Mother's Day indeed. And we're doing a great job representing that based on JD's shirt right here. For those watching on YouTube, maybe one of the greatest contemporary movie moms.
This is my favorite movie mother. Of course, if you are watching on YouTube, you know what I am referring to. For the listeners out there, I am wearing our InSession Film designed Arrival t-shirt that has Amy Adams, of course, from Arrival, with the famous phrase from that film. I love this shirt. This is what I've been wearing all day to celebrate Mother's Day.
That's a great one.
Decided to rock it out here on the show as well.
That's a great one.
My favorite mother, for sure.
Favorite movie mother? Man, that's a great question to ask any film buff. That's a hard one to answer. I think off the cuff for me, maybe Frances McDormand in Almost Famous.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that one as well.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, but that's a lot of great movie moms out there for sure, and all of them worth celebrating today.
Another one that I'll bring up because it's been in the discourse recently. Although, if I'm being perfectly honest, it's in the discourse all of the time, and that is Aliens.
Oh gosh, heck yeah!
One of the best films ever about mothers, and
that's a Mother's Day movie.
Mothers really in that film,
kind of, yeah.
So,
one human, one not.
Exactly, both trying to protect their little babies. I love that film.
That whole franchise is kind of about motherhood in a very strange, twisted way. At least those first 3 films. That first 3 is kind of a quasi Mother's Day trilogy in a very grotesque way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's a new tradition for me at least. Every Mother's Day, I'm watching the Alien trilogy.
Aliens.
Every Mother's Day. Aliens, and Alien 3. Those 3 in particular really. So I mean, Alien Resurrection kind of delves into those themes as well in a very twisted way by the climax. So. I guess, kind of a quadrilogy, I guess you can really lump together there.
For sure. I love those movies. Those first 3 especially are really, really great. And as far as the debate goes, because the nucleus of the discourse, is it aliens? Are you alien? Which one do you lean? I am here to say I am pro-alien and aliens. I don't think you have to choose. I think they're both masterpieces, and we can celebrate them equally. That's where I stand. Hot take. I know. We live in a bipolar internet age where you have to pick one, and I'm refusing. I refuse to pick.
Yeah, I kind of refuse to pick. I don't refuse to pick because I am more Alien than Aliens, but I'm also someone that thinks both are among the 2 best movies that I've seen in the sci-fi genre. Like I think Alien is probably my favorite Ridley Scott film, and Aliens is probably my favorite James Cameron film. So we're talking about the best of the best of the best, regardless of how you stack them.
Yeah, there really isn't much separation for me if we are doing a Letterboxd ranking, for example, and when you partake in that exercise, there is very tangibly a 1 slot and a 2 slot. So in that format, you do have to choose. And I would just go by release order in that instance, Alien, then Aliens. But as far as I'm concerned, they're same grade.
You know what we should do? So I wish that Letterboxd had the ability or gave us the ability to create our own individual movie profiles. And what I mean by that is when you go and look up, let's say Kill Bill, for instance, which is obviously Volume 1 and Volume 2. There is a version on Letterboxd of Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair. There's also a version on Letterboxd of Lord of the Rings as an entire trilogy. Someone should craft an Alien/Aliens single film. So that way we can rank them both together in one ranking.
There you go. Or that as well. We'll have to bring that up with the Letterboxd brass and see if they can come up with that.
We don't actually recommend doing that, but I think it'd be funny.
Yeah, absolutely. At any rate, Mother's Day, we hope everyone had a great weekend celebrating the moms in their lives.
Absolutely.
I do want to note as well, Patreon. So Brendan and I have been talking. We're going to put some more emphasis into Patreon and our bonus content moving forward. So I do want to note that we are due to have some bonus content. So if you are subscribed to Patreon, we have some things that we are working on that we will get to Patreon or YouTube if you're a member on YouTube, Apple Podcast subscription. However,
all the VIPs.
You support the show. We do have some bonus content coming soon. So be on the lookout for that. And we're working on our scheduling to make sure that we have more consistency as far as Patreon goes. So we are going to be putting some more emphasis on that. So if you want to support the show, patreon.com/InSessionFilm is a great way to support us. And if you do sign up and become an InSession Film VIP, again, you can do that through YouTube memberships, Apple Podcast subscriptions, or Patreon. However you decide to support us, if you sign up, we will always take suggestions as far as content goes as well. So that would also be very helpful. If there's something that you want us to talk about, we will add that to the list. But I did want to note that for our InSession Film VIP listeners.
Yep.
As far as this week's show goes, we do have a top 5. We are going to be talking about actor comebacks, and this is inspired by Josh Hartnett and this new era that he is in. Which,
love it.
Of course, goes back to last year as well, and him working with M. Night Shyamalan. That was a lot of fun. He's in a new movie out this weekend called Fight or Flight. We will have a review of Fight or Flight coming very soon. But this new Hartnett essence that we are experiencing right now is a lot of fun. I am totally here for it.
I love it. I love it. I love it so much. And it dates back even before Trap, because you had his appearance in Oppenheimer. I'd say in a way, I mean, Josh Hartnett never really went away, but people started to regain an appreciation for him, I guess, starting with Wrath of Man, the Guy Ritchie film. I feel like maybe that's where people started to take notice of him all over again, which was kind of fun to see. But it's really great to see an actor like that with that much creativity and that much range getting more of a notice again.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, it goes back to Oh Lucy in 2018, I believe, is when we got that.
That's a good point. I didn't see that
States.
one. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Really enjoyed seeing him in that. But I will admit, before Oh Lucy, it had been a dozen years since I've seen Josh Hartnett in a film, maybe longer than that.
And interestingly, like I said, he didn't really go away. He was in a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows, but I feel like, for those of us who are of a certain age, if you went to Blockbuster or whatever, you would get to a section that was clearly, what do they call it? Like direct to video releases, kind of the scum of the litter. Josh Hartnett was in a lot of those types of movies in the 2010s, it seemed like. So like I said, he never really went away. It was just more of
he just wanted to be out of the spotlight. He's been very vocal about this. So there is nothing new, but yes, he comes back into mainstream Hollywood, you could say, with maybe Wrath of Man being the beginning of that. Then he gets into Oppenheimer, of course, and then lands Trap. And now here we are with Fight or Flight. And I'm very, very excited to see this trend continue as we move forward. So we are using that as inspiration to talk about actor comebacks. And I am looking forward to digging into that here in a moment. Before we do, though, a couple of items here up front. One, going off of last week, we talked a lot about Marvel and the MCU and Thunderbolts. It was a really great week having that conversation. And there was some news this last week that Jake Schreier, the director of Thunderbolts, might be tapped to do the new X-Men movie for the MCU. And how do you feel about that, Brendan?
Nah.
Okay.
And let me say it this way. I guess there's a longer answer, obviously. I don't think Jake Schreier is a bad choice for X-Men, at least given what we saw with Thunderbolts. I think he can craft a fairly efficient X-Men movie based on his experience that we've seen thus far. I just wish and I hope that if Marvel's going to start acknowledging the mistakes that they've made over the last few years with phases 4 and 5, they have to stop giving new things to the last immediate success that they had. And that's the thing that worries me, just more so the immediacy of this potential announcement. Because we've seen Marvel do this a lot. They had a hit with Spider-Man Homecoming, for instance. Okay, so let's give everything to John Watts going forward. He's now going to do Fantastic Four. Well, that didn't happen. And these kind of things tend to happen. They announce things too quickly based on whatever immediate success that they had and just had, that they don't do the thinking yet. So I just don't want them to jump the gun. That's the thing that scares me and why I'm a little bit unsure about this news. It's not so much the Jake Schreier announcement. It's more so the Marvel announcement specifically and how they're choosing to go about this. I'd rather see them take their time, focus a bit on what they need to do before they really jump the gun on what their last immediate success was, and really take their time with it.
The only thing that gives me hope about this, and I guess there's two things. I love Thunderbolts, obviously.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good.
If you listen to our review last week, I opened my thoughts on that film by stating pretty aggressively, you could argue, that it was in my top 10 of the entire MCU. Forget Phase 4 and 5, which it's very much in the argument to be the best since Endgame. But of all of the MCU, I think it's a top 10 Marvel film.
It's really good, man. It's really good.
It's awesome. So that gives me hope.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is that what they're tasking him to do isn't a sequel to Thunderbolts. It's something else entirely. And the reason that gives me hope is that when they have asked directors to come back, typically they are for sequels. And sequels in the MCU with the same filmmakers have had lesser returns most of the time.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. When you think about the Thor films, for example, those got worse and worse. In Black Panther Wakanda Forever, as much as I do really like the film, I do think it is great. I don't think it's nearly as good as Black Panther.
Yeah.
Maybe that is debatable for some, but I would argue there are lesser returns there. And I think part of the convolution of Wakanda Forever is because there's much more Marvel that Coogler had to deal with versus Black Panther. It could be more of a Coogler film than an MCU film until you get to the third act, obviously.
Yeah.
Where that balancing act was much more of a struggle in Wakanda Forever. Now, there are external circumstances.
There were very tragic circumstances there for sure.
And I understand that. A lot of grace and patience, which is ultimately, again, why I do really like Wakanda Forever. Don't get me wrong. But
it has some very high highs. It's a very inconsistent movie.
I agree.
Yeah.
But when you accumulate all of that together, I do think there are diminishing returns there. So generally, I think bringing back the same director to do a sequel to their previous film, and John Watts is another example. We debated, talked about how Far From Home was quite.
That was
like
very much.
I will still kind of defend it, but it is a messier film than its predecessor.
It
No
definitely
Way Home.
has.
He does come back with No Way Home, though. That is probably the biggest outlier to my argument here.
Yeah, I think Far From Home, that middle film of the Spider-Man quote-unquote trilogy there, definitely feels the most corporately mandated when compared to Homecoming. No Way Home, there definitely seems to be more of a compromise between what John Watts is trying to bring to that film and how he's trying to work alongside Marvel and even Sony with bringing all that stuff together.
Yeah.
So there's definitely more of a smoothness there, even if I may argue that Homecoming is the closest to maybe his directorial vision. But No Way Home is a very efficient coming together of all of those different things. So I think that's maybe an example of maybe it kind of working in that director's favor. So I think that's a fair point there.
Yeah, Ant-Man films are another great example of what I'm talking about as well. Diminishing
Oh my
returns
gosh.
as those.
Quantumania was
along.
not directed by Peyton Reed.
Absolutely. The Russo brothers might be another outlier here, but they're working with the Avengers movies, so
They're working with a system there.
Yeah, like it feels like that's a separate thing altogether.
Yeah.
And the Russos are clearly working closely with Feige in that case, and obviously Feige doesn't have his hands as deeply into all of these other films as he's going to with the Avengers. So I don't know how much those films count per se. But
I would
generally,
agree.
Generally speaking, if the news was Jake Schreier's coming back to do Thunderbolts 2, then
That'd be worse. That'd be worse. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that'd be worse.
Him coming back to do a different project altogether, I'm not opposed to that, especially since Thunderbolts was great. So if he teams up with another pair of writers that can deliver great material, and obviously the X-Men is rich with great material in the comics.
Sure.
So depending on how they decide to utilize that, now we're decades deep into the MCU. So they can't start from scratch. I guess we'll see how Doomsday gives them a launching pad.
Sure.
Doomsday and Secret Wars.
Yeah.
How does that give them a launching pad to do their X-Men movie? We'll see where that goes. Maybe there will be more of a starting from scratch than I'm giving it credit for now. I don't know. It's hard to say because we haven't seen Doomsday and Secret Wars yet. We don't know how they're coming into the MCU.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of rich material to choose from in the comics. Really, I think the biggest hurdle that they have to climb over is there's been 2 decades of X-Men movies. You have to differentiate yourself from those movies with a new cast, I would assume, a new cast of X-Men characters.
Especially when they're bringing back most of the old cast for Doomsday.
Which, again, like my theory there is, and they've more or less confirmed, right? So the X-Men coming, like the OG characters coming in are from another universe, quote unquote, coming from another universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever happens with Secret Wars and Doomsday, the 616 X-Men, I'm going to assume is going to bring us a new cast. That's what makes sense to me.
I would expect, maybe even kind of hope so. Because I want to see a new iteration of it, especially given how much time we've spent with this old universe, and especially since Disney, Marvel / I guess now technically Fox in a way, given what we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine, they're closing the loop on that old world of X-Men. That's the whole point of all of this, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to give them closure, and then you'll be able to bring in the new 616 iteration of these characters, and I assume that means a new cast to take the mantle for those characters. Unless you're bringing back the Fassbender crew, and that's the 616 iteration.
Oh gosh, that's messy.
Maybe, but I could see Disney pulling the trigger there because we already know those characters. We know the actors very well, and we love those actors as those characters already.
Is that going to be Marvel's way of explaining how there was such a lack of continuity with the X-Men Fox movies by saying that these were actually different universes the whole time?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Again, that is a stretch. I'm not expecting that at all. I think we are going to get a new cast altogether for the 616 X-Men. And that gives Schreier and his writing team a blank slate for the most part.
Yeah.
And we've already seen Schreier work within those confines, within the MCU confines, while also doing his own thing.
Yeah.
With Thunderbolts, obviously.
Yeah.
And that is a team-up movie. So, I mean, all the puzzle pieces are there for Schreier to make a really good X-Men movie. And I'm more excited for that than if they said he's coming back for Thunderbolts too.
Oh, I would be less excited for a Thunderbolt sequel, and he was coming back for that. But at the same time, like I said, really the thing that puts me or makes me a little apprehensive about this news with Jake Schreier coming in to do X-Men, like I said, it's really more to do with the immediacy of this announcement, because I feel like it's once again a reflection of Marvel's bad habits. And I thought they were trying to get away from this. Okay, we just had a big success with this movie. Okay, this director's doing more stuff now. So, and they've done this many times, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. And I don't necessarily mind the idea of Jake Schreier coming back to do X-Men. I think his sensibilities would work for that. Like I said, if Marvel's at a place where they want to start reconfiguring their agenda and their slate and how they're going to go about this, I think they need to pause when they make these decisions. I don't think it can be rapid fire. And I think, once again, it seems to reflect kind of this battle between how Feige wants to do things and then how Bob Iger is very immediately doing things, because those producers are very attracted to short-term success.
Well, and here's the other caveat to what you're talking about, because Bob Iger you almost have to laugh when he says this, but he did come out last week to reiterate that they have shifted priorities and they are now focusing on quality over quantity. Those are his words. Again, yeah, I agree. You have to laugh.
He is gaslighting us so bad. He is,
gaslighting everybody.
Someone made the great comparison that said what he is doing is essentially what Valentina does at the end of Thunderbolts.
It's pretty much.
It's the exact same thing. And I fully buy into that theory. I do.
I mean, I totally get it as well. However, if I'm going to take him at his word, look at the face value of it, and they really believe that Jake Schreier can deliver on that quality, for me, this comes down to, can they keep their hands out of the cookie jar and let Jake Schreier cook, as the kids say? If they let him make his movie, again, understandably, there's always going to be parameters to the MCU, as they had with Thunderbolts. But if Bob Iger can stay away, let Kevin Feige do his thing, let Jake Schreier do his thing, and keep the corporate interest away from that and let them actually focus on quality, then okay. I can buy those comments. But we have to see it to believe it. Your word at this point means nothing.
And that's
okay, Bob?
that is why this news gives me pause. Because there's nothing as of yet to put their money where their mouths are. Like to justify this new way of thinking. This immediate action of bringing Jake Schreier back in any form feels more mirroring of their previous bad habits that they claim to want to get away from. And I could be wrong. This could be something that they're just simply announcing now, but for all we know, Jake Schreier will be working on his X-Men movie in the next 6 or 7 years and has time to work on it. And Bob Iger and the producers at Disney, the check cutters, if you will stay away. And maybe I'll be proven wrong. And that's what I hope to see. And if Bob Iger is honest with those words, then maybe we'll see that. Because I think he's also saying, I don't know if it was him, maybe it was Kevin Feige. They're also saying that what we see going forward on Disney Plus will mostly only feature characters not in the movies going forward, which I think is not necessarily a bad call, in order to try and keep that world a little bit separated from the cinematic world, so there's less quote-unquote homework to be doing. I don't necessarily mind that. So it seems as though, given these announcements, that they are retooling. I just hope they're not jumping the gun and going back to old habits with this. And that's the thing that gives me pause.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Bob's got to prove it now with his actions.
Yeah.
I mean, what he's saying is great.
I agree. It's the right thing.
I want to believe him, but I don't, because his actions prior to all of this have proven that all he wants to do is make a mess of things.
Let's see how the rest of Phase 6 plays out.
But they have time. They have time, because Phase 6 right now, unless they decide to pivot, is Fantastic Four, Doomsday, Spider-Man Brand New Day, and Secret Wars. I did hear a rumor that there is going to be another film in between Doomsday and Secret Wars, aside from Spider-Man. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think that's official at this point. However, if Phase 6 stays as it is, that means that this new X-Men film will not come until 2027 after Secret Wars. So one would assume toward the end of that year, most likely you're looking at 2028. So you do have 3 years to work on this and get it right.
Unless that's the secret film Jake Schreier is already working on.
Which... that would not surprise me. That would not surprise me if that is the mystery film to come out in between Doomsday and Secret Wars. And it would make sense, given...
It kind of would. It kind of would, actually, wouldn't it?
It would.
Yeah.
I mean, the timeline matches up there, and we know those characters are going to be heavily involved in those Avengers movies. So
I feel like if this secret film that hasn't been announced yet, if it even exists, if it is going to happen, it's most likely some type of X-Men movie. Maybe it'll be a third Doctor Strange movie, but I can't imagine it really being anything else. because I feel like everything else they could do, they could theoretically wrap up somewhere within Doomsday or Secret Wars. I feel like it's, I don't know, if they do have some secret film that they haven't announced yet that's being worked on behind enemy lines, if you will, kudos on them for keeping that at bay. I will give them credit for that.
Yeah. So we shall see. Secret Wars, as of now, if I'm not mistaken, is slated for May 7th, 2027.
Mm-hmm.
So either that is an early 2027 film, a la to Brave New World this year, or I guess it could be a late October, November release of 2026. We'll see. We'll see. I'm curious where they slot it in, theatrically speaking.
Yeah.
To make all of this work.
Yep, absolutely.
We'll find out soon enough. Before we get to the top 5, I also want to note that the Cannes Film Festival is beginning this week.
Exciting times. We have some friends going over there, don't we?
We do have some friends going over there. We don't have time to do a full preview here, but I did want to perhaps ask what films stick out to you, Brennan, as far as the movies in competition. We do know that Mission Impossible is also screening over there, but we are also getting critical screenings this week. In fact, as you are listening to this, because we are releasing this on Monday, I am probably at the theater watching Final Reckoning as you're hearing this.
There you go.
It's very possible.
And JD's going to text me right away afterwards whether it makes Dead Reckoning a better movie or not.
We shall see. We shall see. I am looking forward to Final Reckoning, though. Despite how I feel about Dead Reckoning, I am very much looking forward to it. That is also getting a screening at Cannes. But any other films jump out to you? Because there are quite a few in competition this year that I am deeply, deeply looking forward to.
This is pretty stacked. It's very stacked for us cinema lovers. I would say the one that probably sticks out to me the most is The Mastermind, the new film from Kelly Reichardt. And I think it really is it's the cast and the overall premise that is getting me most excited, outside of just the fact that it's a new Kelly Reichardt film. Because you have Josh O'Connor, Alana Haim, John Magaro, who's worked with her before, Bill Camp and Hope Davis, really great character actors there. And apparently this is some type of World War II heist movie.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily expect Kelly Reichardt to make a quote-unquote genre film. If anything, it'll be, her take on the Western genre when she made a movie like First Cow. It'll be a very subtle take.
Or Meek's Cutoff.
Well, actually, that's a great comparison.
It might be closer to Meek's Cutoff.
Might be. Really. Actually, that's a good point. That's probably the closest quote-unquote genre film she's made, where the genre itself feels more noticeable, deliberately so. But I feel like maybe this will be a similar thing with The Mastermind. And I think Meek's Cutoff is one of her best movies. I mean, she's never made a bad movie, but if I were to rank her films off the cuff here, Meek's Cutoff is probably top 3 for me. So I'm really looking forward to The Mastermind. That's the first one that comes to mind for sure, but there are certainly a lot of others we can quickly name off here. I'll just simply say there's a new film from Richard Linklater. He has 2 new films coming out this year, apparently.
Which we talked about quite heavily during our yearly preview episode back in January.
But Nouvelle Vague comes out as one that's also in competition. Obviously looking forward to that. I'm always looking forward to something that Richard Linklater does. And the 2 films he has coming out this year seem very Linklater-like, because he's a director that he'll sometimes make movies that are very much Richard Linklater movies, but then he'll also make things that are more so directed by Richard Linklater. You kind of have like a bit of a disparity between, let's say, the Before trilogy and School of Rock, for instance. Both awesome, both absolutely awesome, but there is sort of a distance between the types of movies that they are. But it seems like both of these movies coming out this year fit more into the Linklater of, let's say, Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some and Boyhood, that experimental side of Linklater that likes to mess with natural progression of time through dialogue. And I cannot wait to see that.
Yeah, and they're both about adaptations and art, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how synonymous they are with each other. They seem very thematically tethered.
They almost seem like they were designed as like a double bill. They're probably going to be marketed that way as like a weird double feature of sorts.
Yeah, really, really looking forward to both of those films. The Mastermind is in my top 5 most anticipated films of the year. Kelly Reichardt is one of my directors. I love her. One of my very, very favorites. Looking forward to that. Another one that I am dying, very much pun intended, to see is
Nice
Lynn
work
Ramsey's
there.
new film, Die My Love.
Nice work there. I should have expected you to make such a dad joke with that one.
Yep. I know it's Mother's Day, but got to insert some dad humor into the episode as well.
It's not even your holiday yet. Come on,
Not
you got like
even
a
my
month
holiday.
yet.
I'm just hijacking it a little bit here. Yeah, I do apologize. But yeah, Die My Love, Robert Pattinson, Jennifer Lawrence, Lakeith Stanfield, Sissy Spacek, Nick Nolte in a Lynn Ramsey movie. Yes, sign me up.
That's a great cast.
Word on the street, this is going to be appropriate to this week's show, a big comeback for Jennifer Lawrence into the mainstream. She, like many of the actors I'm sure we'll talk about once we get to the top 5, she's been working, but she hasn't been in the zeitgeist in quite a while. This film very much could change that. I could see her being a big Oscar player at the end of the year. Die My Love. Also want to note Ari Aster's Eddington, which is getting a summer release here in the United States. That is going to get its premiere over at Cannes. Jafar Panahi, who is one of my favorite directors. If you have not seen a Panahi film, do yourself a favor and go and check out his work. It is absolutely incredible.
What an interesting filmmaker. And with his movies, if you've never seen any one of his movies, it's kind of best to know the circumstances of how his movies get made to really appreciate them. I'll just simply say that. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Judy, one of his movies was made while he was on house arrest or something like that.
Yeah, he was very much on house arrest and had to film a lot of it secretly. Most of his films these days he has to make secretly.
Yeah. But knowing those circumstances is what makes his movie so interesting.
I agree. I don't know too much about the film. It's titled It Was Just an Accident, and the synopsis is what begins as a minor accident sets in motion a series of escalating consequences. Sounds like a Panahi film if I've ever heard one. So very much looking forward to that one. My beloved Wes Anderson, The Phoenician Scheme, gets its premiere later on in the week. That is, of course, coming to theaters in about a month's time. So very much looking forward to that as well. Joachim Trier has a new film, Sentimental Value. I know a lot of our cinephile friends are very much looking forward to that one.
Good cast as well.
Great cast coming back for that one. And what else that we have here? I'm trying to look at this as we talk. I think those are the big ones that I wanted to. Oh, The History of Sound.
Okay.
Another one that I wanted to mention. Oliver.
History of Sound. Yeah, that's a good one. New film from Julia Ducournau. Her new film Alpha.
Writer
director of Titan. So I guess that's another one we can consider there. And these are most of these movies we mentioned are ones that will be in competition at the Cannes Film Festival. Yes. We haven't really looked at those outside of the competition just yet, outside of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. But one of those movies out of competition includes the new film from Spike Lee, the new joint from Spike Lee, which is his take on Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, this time called Highest to Lowest, working once again with Denzel Washington. That trailer was pretty riveting. And gripping. I somehow combined the words gripping and riveting. That's how good it was.
I love it. That's how we work.
It was very riveting.
Yeah,
it helps us save time. By combining.
Exactly.
Either way, the movie looks awesome.
It does look awesome. I'm very much looking forward to whatever Spike Lee has up his sleeve. Scarlett Johansson's directorial debut, Eleanor the Great, is also getting an out of competition premiere at Cannes as well. Eleanor the Great is the name of that one. And it, of course, stars the great June Squibb. I love that all these years later, June Squibb is finally getting her day in the sun. It's so great. I do love that. And also Kristen Stewart has a film there, The Chronology of Water, is getting premiere can as well.
All right.
So
movies are cool.
Highlight those.
Movies can be awesome.
Yes, absolutely. And there's obviously going to be a lot of other movies to play over at Con. We'll certainly keep an eye out. Very much looking forward to all of those. All right, Brennan, let's talk about security and traveling and making sure that you can access everything you want to while you're away.
Making sure your prime assets are safe and nothing is compromised.
Absolutely. That's what we love about NordVPN. It is fast. It is secure. It protects users from prying and getting your IP address. NordVPN secures online traffic through encryption, of course, making it hard to hijack your data. It is available on all of these operating systems. It includes TV, smartphones, anything that you want to take all this technology, you want to travel, you can take it with you. If you want to take your TV to Iceland, go for it.
Don't know if I'd recommend that, but you certainly could, and you could feel safe about doing so.
Exactly.
And the thing about NordVPN, their Threat Protection Pro feature helps to block malware, ads, malicious sites, and various other trackers there. It was so good, it was to the point that it was picked as the best VPN by outlets such as PC Mag, Forbes, Wired, Tech Advisor, and many others. 7,200 plus servers in almost 120 countries. Their speed is remarkable. Their security is even better.
Yeah, NordVPN is great. During the summer months, though, it gets even better because they are partnering with Saley. If you don't know Saley, they offer an eSIM that works through an app on your phone. So you don't have to get a different SIM card when you're traveling like you used to have, when you were back in the day. You'd have to get a new SIM card, enter that into the phone, then travel. It was a whole process. You don't have to do that anymore. Saley is just an app on your phone, and it makes it gives you that digital eSIM that you need when you're traveling, so you have access to everything you want as you travel as well. And right now, you can get up to 73% off selected NordVPN plans and get a free Global Saley eSIM data plan. So use the link in our description, click on that link, and sign up for one of the NordVPN plans. You can get 1 gigabyte up to 5 gigabytes or 10 gigabytes. Choose one of the plans, and you will get a free Saley eSIM data plan as well. You'll get an email you'll get a code in an email once you sign up for NordVPN to get that Saley. So travel, be secure, get a free eSIM. I mean, it's a perfect scenario.
There's no reason not to be safe anymore. No reason not to.
Absolutely. Again, click the link in the description for this episode, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Click on the link, sign up for NordVPN, and take advantage of both NordVPN and Saley. This is a really great combination that you're going to get here. So have a great summer traveling, and we thank NordVPN for their support. All right, Brennan, let's talk about InSession Film t-shirts. And swag,
toys,
and all kinds of fun things.
Oh man, our logo is great, but some of these designs you come up with, man, they're even greater.
I appreciate that. I do find myself getting distracted throughout the week trying to come up with new designs, and maybe I don't get as much work done as I could have, but I do love coming up with different designs for the store.
And for those watching on YouTube, as we talked about earlier in this episode, very appropriate given the Mother's Day theme today.
Mom.
Yeah. One of the greatest movie moms of the 21st century. Very emotional one nonetheless. But we are, of course, talking about the great Amy Adams from Arrival. But that's just one of great t-shirt designs you can get from the InSession Film store.
Yeah. Go to InSessionFilm.com/store or go directly to the store at InSessionFilm.dashery.com. That's the website we use to host all of our designs. It is a venture through TeePublic. But InSessionFilm.dashery.com, you can see all of our designs right there in one little location. I've even dropped the price down a little bit, more so than the average TeePublic site. So you can get a little bit of a discount if you go directly through InSessionFilm.dashery.com. And yeah, you can get an InSession film or, an Arrival design. We have movies are my expensive form of therapy. That's a fun little one that we've gotten here on the show. Recently, we have a design. I'm like Jesus because I love sinners. So if you're a sinner's head like we are, we have a film score junkie shirt that I cannot stop wearing. I just wear that everywhere I go. I love that design.
That shirt is JD's baby.
It is. Oh, it's so good. I loved it. Worked really hard on it. Do like that one a lot. So yes, go to InSessionFilm.com/store or InSessionFilm.dashery.com. Either way, you'll see all of the designs there. You can get the t-shirts in whatever colors you want. And we have variations of each logo or each design. So that way, if you want to get a white t-shirt or a darker t-shirt, it should work both ways. Yeah. So go get yourself a t-shirt. We really, really do appreciate those that do. Your support, it really does mean the world to us. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our top 5. And it's been a while since we've done a list. I've already told Brendan I want to do more top 5s. I think we're going to start doing more top 5s. As much as I love our consensus ranking exercises and things of that nature, we are going to do a top 5 here for actor comebacks, again, inspired by the wonderful, the lovely Josh Hartnett and this new renaissance that he is currently in right now. And I'm very excited for him. As we get into this list, Brendan, any criteria that you use to set your list?
Yeah, I do and I don't have any criteria, but I think if anything, we need to maybe talk about what a comeback really means.
Okay.
Because I feel like it could mean many things.
It could be defined a couple different ways, for sure.
Yeah, and I will say I didn't really look at a particular type of comeback when drafting my list. And what I mean by that is we can look at actors that maybe had a literal disappearance from the spotlight for whatever those reasons are, maybe by choice or due to tragic circumstances. That could be considered a comeback when they come back to the fold in some way and we take notice. It could also be maybe a new critical reevaluation of their work, even if they never really went anywhere, or maybe a newly formed appreciation for their output. So like a comeback doesn't necessarily mean they had to literally leave the workforce and then they came back. It could be more of a regained notice of what they're doing. And here's a great example. This is someone that won't be in my top 5, so I feel like it's worth mentioning off the cuff here as an honorable mention, but maybe someone like Adam Sandler could almost be deemed as a bit of a comeback-like thing because he technically never went away. But the types of movies he was making, Adam Sandler movies, there was a point where it seemed like we were getting a little tired of them. And then he just starts sprinkling in these Oscar-worthy performances in random movies. And it's and I feel like now, especially after Uncut Gems in particular, we've kind of developed a newly found appreciation for Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a comeback, but it's a different type of comeback. But I'm saying like someone like that is still eligible for my list. It's not on my top 5, but like that's an example of someone that it might not be considered a comeback in the literal sense, but I'm still considering something like that.
No, I think that is more or less where I sit as well. I didn't really differentiate the styles of comebacks and and deciding to leave one of those off or not. I completely agree with you. Whether they went away from movies altogether and then came back, some actors do continue to work throughout, but are away from the spotlight, certainly away from the zeitgeist in a lot of ways. But then they make that major Hollywood or artistic comeback that thrust them back into the spotlight in one way, shape, or form. I very much looked at both, and I have examples of both on my list in my top 5 for sure. Really, the only criteria I probably set for myself here is that I didn't want this list to be too modern, because there are a lot of examples within the last 20 years. You could do a top 10 of actors in the last 10 years, especially when you're considering both of those styles of comebacks.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I did want to look beyond the last 20 or 30 years. That was really the only thing that I used to kind of, to keep my list fresh as I possibly could. I did want to look beyond.
Yeah.
But that, other than the timeline, I'm almost exactly with you in terms of, how I define this.
I love that, because I was worried going into this, we may have a lot of crossover in this top 5, but it sounds like, given that specific agenda you have, maybe we won't. Because I am still giving some equal weight to more modern comebacks, because I feel like we need to at least talk about them.
No, there's plenty of great ones to talk about. Yeah, do not get me wrong. I mean,
and that might, and honestly, like the 5 I have in front of me right now is not set in stone. I was actually ready to maybe tweak this a little bit if I felt like we were going to have crossover, just to talk about different ones as we go, because I think they're all worth mentioning for one reason or another. I will say, if there is any criteria that I did have as far as maybe trying to disregard certain ones, there are some actors' comebacks that also very heavily tie to television. I'm trying to avoid those. So I guess
I didn't really think about television. I'd say Coolidge, for example.
Well, Jennifer Coolidge is a great one. I will say a great honorable mention for me as well is one that maybe straddles the line between a television comeback and a film comeback, and that's Winona Ryder. But a lot of her comeback was really built around Stranger Things. Yeah. There's more to it than just that, but I feel like that property was
kind
really
of kick-started it.
Kind of solidified it in many ways. So she's an honorable mention for me for those reasons.
Okay, sounds good. Let's go ahead and jump into this. Brendan, what do you have at number 5?
Number 5, I have John Travolta.
Yeah. Okay. I thought about this one a lot.
Yeah. And this is an example of someone that really didn't go anywhere. He was still in movies in the 80s and into the early 90s. It was just that critical and audience respect for him had started to dwindle until one man took notice of him, that man being Quentin Tarantino with Pulp Fiction. So really, Pulp Fiction is the essence of this comeback. But like I said, John Travolta has always been around. Even just before Pulp Fiction, he was in, what were those movies called? Those talking baby movies. Look Who's Talking. Remember those movies?
You sure?
Yeah. Not great. Not great.
Not great.
But there is clearly a new era that was born for John Travolta, really because of Pulp Fiction. And he had a very specific career in the 90s because of that movie. Not everything in the 90s was necessarily great. He was in a lot of wonky movies, but you can't deny that the power of that one unique performance and one man taking notice of him and tapping into something that hasn't really been seen from this man before, I think makes it one of the most obvious comebacks of all time for an actor. So yeah, John Travolta is at this point right now, my number 5 pick.
Yeah, this is a great pick. This was a solid honorable mention for me. I almost went with this one for all those reasons. It's one that's been pretty heavily talked about over the years, but for good reason. I mean, this is an actor that was so heavily in the culture throughout the 70s, then disappears quite heavily into the 80s and has this massive comeback with Pulp Fiction, which lands him an Oscar nomination. And then he has all those great roles in the 90s that we remember as a result. Yeah. We never get a face-off without Pulp Fiction.
What a great movie that is. Oh my gosh.
So good. I can't fathom that career of John Travolta through the late 90s and early 2000s. It's a reminder that he is still a great actor. Yeah. He might have lost his way a little bit. Maybe he made some bad choices, had a terrible agent. I don't know what the circumstances were that led to him disappearing, but grateful to Tarantino. bringing him back.
You bring up Face Off there, and I don't know if this person's on your top 5, so I don't mean to spoil it, but I feel like Nicolas Cage is someone we can kind of consider here. So I'm just going to throw out another. Yeah. I'm going to throw out another honorable mention here because we're on the topic of Face Off. But Nicolas Cage, I feel like his comeback is more to do with that critical rebirth criteria I talked about, because he never went away as well. But it was more so. It got to a point where we started to appreciate the boldness of Nicolas Cage and just the choices that he makes. And it was more of a critical and audience reinterpretation of what he was doing. But he's another great honorable mention as well.
Yeah, I don't have Cage on my list, but if I was to include him, he probably sits at number 6. I was so close to having Cage on my list. And it comes down to those reasons. I mean, I know that he's been working, but mostly he's been doing these low budget independent films because he needs the money. Yeah. Famously, he is in all of this debt, so he's had to keep working in order to pay it all off. However, throughout all of that, whether it be luck or however it played out, and I think some of it is exactly what you're talking about with the internet age, how that correlates to this rise in critics and how that has expanded over the last 25 years. It kind of came to a crossroads where this new critical age and the digital sphere that we live in, it crossed paths with these little movies that Nicolas Cage was doing, and we all remembered, he's really great. And maybe this little independent film such as Mandy, what a freaking incredible movie.
It was almost like more of a rediscovery of a man that was always there. It was like we were all ignorant to the talent in a way. And we had to do the work to find it. We had to do the work to really understand it. But I think that's a very interesting one.
Absolutely. So he did come back in a big way, and he's even been in a few mainstream Hollywood movies since this comeback of sorts over the last 8 or 9 years, which is very exciting. So I think Cage absolutely qualifies. I almost had him on my list.
Okay.
My number 5 is Jackie Earle Haley.
Whoa.
So
really cool pick.
I love this actor. I think a lot of us love Jackie Earle Haley. He was a teenage icon with the Bad News Bears during the 1970s, of course. And like many child actors, he faded into obscurity, vanished from the spotlight.
Yeah.
For years, he worked a bunch of odd jobs. At one point, I believe he was even driving limos just to make ends meet. His last film before 2006 was in 1993. Maniac Cop 3, Badge of Silence. Such a 90s movie. I love it.
If there's ever an example of a title properly and positively selling the movie, that's a great example of one.
Exactly.
It's like, I've never seen that movie. Like, do you have something you want to recommend to me? And you say that title, it's like, oh, I need to watch that.
I gotta watch that.
I don't even need to know what it's about.
Exactly. So that was the last film he did in the 90s. Takes a wild long break from making movies altogether. So this is almost antithetical to the Nick Cage scenario we just laid out. In 2006, he comes back into the fold with Little Children. And my God, does he come back in a huge, huge way.
Yeah.
A bold, fearless reintroduction where he goes on to have immense critical and award success with Little Children. So he comes back in a big, big way. He is nominated for an Oscar among many, many other accolades for that film. And then has a huge career afterwards. Maybe most notably in that time period. So that's 2006. 2009, he is in Watchmen as Rorschach. And that's another phenomenal performance and character. Say what you will about Watchmen. He is one of the best elements of that film, hands down. He's really, really great in that role. But he was also in Shutter Island. He was in the new Nightmare on Elm Street in 2010.
Yeah.
He went on to be in a bunch of other movies over the last, and he's still continued to work.
Yeah.
Still continued to be in a lot of things since then. So he has this massive break, this 13-year break where he's driving limos, barely making ends meet. Comes back for one movie. He gets cast in one movie and destroys it, gets nominated for an Oscar, and his life completely changes.
That's
unbelievable.
I mean, that should be your number one, honestly. Just given that story.
In terms of story and scale, it is closer to being like one of the more inspirational. For
yeah,
sure.
that's a Hollywood story waiting to be made. It is a Hollywood movie. Story. It really is. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I he's a great honorable mention for me. But honestly, I should have put more weight in the story of his comeback as opposed to the work itself. Because if that were the case, I probably would have had some crossover here because I think that story is just absolutely amazing. And what an actor that he is. I'm not the biggest fan of Shutter Island, but I think he's the best thing in it. I love his brief performance in that movie. It is so impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's like one of those memorable character actors now that
absolutely.
we all really adore and love. And imagine a world without that. Like it's hard to think about the story of cinema in the modern day without his impact. Yeah. And it all comes down to that one little movie in 2006 where he plays this ex-con in this deeply unsettling way. It's great. Oscar nominated.
What are your thoughts on the movie itself?
I do really like the film. I'm a little mixed on it. I don't think it always works, but I think when that film is at its best, I do think it is quite tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. When it comes to Todd Field's directorial efforts, I certainly prefer his other two films.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. But I still really like Little Children on the whole.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. All right, number 4. What do you got?
Number four. I'll get another obvious one out of the way simply because he's my namesake. Another Brendan here.
Okay.
We'll go with Brendan Fraser for my number 4 here. Obviously, his big comeback here being with Darren Aronofsky's The Whale, a movie that I don't dislike, not nearly as much as everyone else seems to, or at least a lot of other people do. I think he's really good in the movie. But I think, if anything, this is where I'm starting to put a little bit of emphasis on the story of the comeback, much like you talked about with Jackie Earle Haley. But Brendan Fraser's comeback and the circumstances of his comeback were certainly a bit more torturous, to say the least. We certainly don't have to get into those details, but I think what makes his comeback so impactful is just the strength and the heroism of it, especially going on to win an Oscar like he did for The Whale, and then also getting to work with Martin Scorsese. Just that simple fact alone in Killers of the Flower Moon. And everyone was weirdly talking about his brief little appearance in that movie for how quote unquote overacted that it was. I loved it. I absolutely loved it because it just once again seems to speak to Brendan Fraser's, passion and excitement for getting back and being loved once again. And in a way, I do feel bad for the man because for a brief moment, especially if you look at the late 90s, he was kind of becoming a bit of a Hollywood commodity and was being kind of molded to play certain roles, especially when you look at, let's say, The Mummy and George of the Jungle. There was definitely sort of a molding effect happening to turn him into another Hollywood hunk, if you will. And outside of just the tragic circumstances of what really happened to him, even that must have been psychologically affecting for him. So to make this return, to be very open and transparent about what he went through, I think takes a lot of guts, a lot of strength, and I respect that so much. So there's a heroism to his comeback that I don't think we can ignore, and I wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser is such an interesting pick, and it is maybe the pinnacle of my whole ethos of stop turning art into sports. because his comeback is almost antithetical to everything we just talked about with Jackie Early Ailey, because prior to The Whale coming out, I'd say there was no one else in Hollywood that collectively we would all be like, yeah, it'd be awesome to have Fraser as a comeback. We would all love that. Generally, I think there was a lot of empathy for him and his story and how tragic and heartbreaking it was. Everything that he had to overcome. There was a lot of, at least in the film Twitter sphere, and I don't know how much of that is, how much that points to, reality. But generally, it felt like a lot of people were pro Brendan Fraser and would love to see him have this comeback.
Yeah.
And then The Whale comes out, and overnight, it felt like everybody turned on him because of the movie itself. That's part of it. I think there's a tinge of anti-Aronofsky people out there that just don't really love his work altogether. And then there's the awards part of it, which I think is maybe the bulk of this pivoting on Brendan Fraser, because it's a performance that they don't love in a film that they don't love, and it is the front runner to win, and it's going to take away an Oscar from other performances that are worthy of that award. And you know how I feel about that. I've talked about this so many times here on the show about how much emphasis we put into awards, and it does matter. I understand that it isn't just this silly, goofy thing, even though it is. There are tangible consequences, which is why they do matter to some degree, but they're absolutely not the be all end all when it comes to art. And I hate that we've turned it into a sports competition. Yeah, because that is ultimately why people turned on Brendan Fraser.
And it's not fair to him. It's not fair to him.
It's not fair to him. And it's not even that they don't like him or that he's capable of doing great performances. It's because he posed a threat to another performance that they loved.
Well,
that's what all of this came down to.
That's part of it. That's certainly a big part of it. It's also, I think, part of it to do with how people just have this sort of disdain for a lot of Aronofsky's films. So it's just the idea that, he's willing to work with that man. Now I don't like him anymore. Yeah,
Aronofsky, that relationship, certainly a part of it. I don't disagree. But I just found it borderline feckless that overnight people just turned on him because they didn't like a performance that he gave, or they didn't like the film that he was in. And it was all over the discourse. And given what he went through to get to that point and just be completely dismissive of that. I think it's
disingenuous. At best.
I don't know if I'm now victim of overplaying my hand a little bit. I don't know, but I can't help it. I find that behavior gross. I find it gross. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you have to like the performance or that you have to like the movie. I'm not saying that. I don't love the film either.
Yeah, but can you at least be happy for the man? Does that make you? That's the thing. Does that make you unhappy for the comeback? Does that make you mad that he's back in the spotlight? Because if it is, that's just mean behavior. That's just so inhumane.
I don't think the Oscars are the be all end all of anything. So that is part of it. At the end of the day, I don't really care who wins and loses because that doesn't speak to greatness for me. The Oscars are the Oscars. They come with rules. There are very strict guidelines that it abides by. It is not at all the be all. It's not the be all end all for anything. It's just a fun thing for us to partake in. Yeah. And that's all it should be. But it's become more than that for whatever reason. And Brendan Fraser was a victim of that disgusting behavior, because what he overcame to get to that point should be celebrated. Should be incredible. Like the story of him coming back and winning an Oscar after being blacklisted from Hollywood and everything that he had to go through. That is phenomenal. Why is that not the story?
I love
It's
when
insane.
I can get JD on his turning art into the sports soapbox.
I'm sorry. I can't help myself.
It was we haven't had a moment like this in a while. It was bound to happen again.
Yeah, I can't help myself. I mean,
I agree with you,
last
though. I absolutely
year-
agree with everything you just said.
like I feel like there was nothing too egregious. The Amelia Perez thing was a little absurd, but
yeah, that's another conversation.
yeah, the Brendan Fraser thing drives me nuts because to me it's the hypocritical nature of it all.
I agree.
We love Brendan Fraser. We would love to see him make a comeback. What he went through was terrible. The Whale comes out and everyone's like, "Screw Brendan Fraser," and it drives me nuts. Drives me nuts.
I don't like people sometimes.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say.
And again, like I wouldn't have given him the Oscar either.
No,
I wouldn't have voted
no.
for him. I wouldn't have nominated. I wouldn't have nominated the film either for anything. That doesn't mean that we can't celebrate what he experienced, like how he got to that point, like how he overcame. Like that is an incredible story.
I'm very happy for the man. I really am.
At any rate,
Yeah.
I am happy for the man as well.
Yeah.
I don't care about the whale. We don't have to talk about the whale. The man himself, what he overcame, that is pretty awesome.
So glad he's on one of our lists, just given that epic rant right there. Well done, GD. Well
Thank
done.
you.
I love you
appreciate
for
it.
that.
I appreciate it. All right, my number 4. This is it might be a little bit of a surprise to some out there. I'm going with the legendary Fred Astaire.
Interesting. Okay.
So obviously, this is an actor that is famous for his elegance in musicals and his dancing. He's been in so many iconic movies, right? By the 1960s, he had stepped away from film and had done some TV appearances, but he was mostly done making movies. Then in 1974, at the age of 75, he comes back to the movies for a little film called The Towering Inferno, a movie that goes on to be nominated for Best Picture, if I'm not mistaken. And he, instead of doing a musical film, right, where he's got his tap shoes on and he's doing what he is most known for, instead of doing that, he does a dramatic, emotional supporting role. It is this quiet, heartfelt performance that also earns him an Oscar nomination. And it goes on to demonstrate that beyond just being this graceful dancer, he is a powerful actor who can also deliver understated and deeply nuanced performances. And that, to me, I think is quite remarkable. To step away from movies in the early 1960s. So it'd been a dozen years or so since he had done anything. And not only does he come back, he comes back for something completely different than what he's known for, and just hits a home run. Hits a home run in The Towering Inferno. I think that is pretty incredible. And maybe one of those stories that is under discussed when this topic is brought up. So I wanted to highlight it here. It is my number 4.
That's a really great and inspired pick as well. I love when you see an actor or actress sort of get pigeonholed or typecast into a certain thing because that's what their thing was for so long.
Yeah.
That whether there be a break involved or they try to make some type of artistic transition into something new, and they do a really good job at that transition. I think that's always an interesting thing to see. That's actually a really nice segue into my number 3. And I'm going to be giving another obvious one away before I transition to my top 2, which are a bit more on the old Hollywood side of things. So we may have some crossover there, JD, but my number 3 is Robert Downey Jr. And what I like about this comeback is that it is kind of similar to that artistic transition with Fred Astaire as you're talking about. But in a way, it sort of predates that as well. Robert Downey Jr. kind of had a double comeback in some ways. You obviously have that first Iron Man, even to some extent, movies like Zodiac and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang that sort of led into that. But in many ways, his persona and his suave exterior is what sort of gave birth to the modern superhero template. And it was amazing. He was so good at it. But then he started to become kind of typecast around that thing for so long. Even some of his starring roles outside of Marvel still kind of carried the Tony Stark isms that we associated with Robert Downey Jr. You watch movies like The Soloist or even Due Date, for instance. They're very much tapping into that formula that was working for him at the time. But then he goes on to do Oppenheimer. And it was very much proving a point that, no, we've got a new side of him. And hopefully we still see that new side of him, given the fact that Doomsday is coming out soon. So maybe I might eat those words. But the fact that Robert Downey Jr. kind of has a bit of a double comeback story, an artistic one and a literal one, I think makes it a very powerful one nonetheless. So I did want to at least highlight that before we get into some maybe older picks with our respective top twos here. But I do think Downey Jr. is certainly a more obviously cited one here for very good reason.
Yep, I have Robert Downey Jr. at number 2.
Oh,
he's
okay.
very much on my list as well.
Okay, that's great to hear.
Yep, I love Robert Downey Jr. and it is hard to ignore this comeback story, right? I mean, obviously he is prominent in the early 90s. Then has all of his legal and substance abuse issues, goes away, and the fact that he got in trouble for a lot of those things prior to the internet really speaks to how bad it was, because that was an era where you could get away with doing a lot of bad things. Like today,
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
With the internet discourse today, you can't even shoplift without the internet just killing you.
Very good point, man.
It is a very different universe that we live in today. And the fact that he got in trouble and was blacklisted for whatever he did during that era, it really says something. So he comes back, and you're right that there are two phases here for sure, because he comes back with something like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, has a little role in Good Night and Good Luck. Really great film. Love that one as well.
Very good.
Zodiac, as you mentioned, and maybe underratedly, I love A Scanner Darkly as well.
Oh, great movie. Yeah.
So throughout 2005, 6, and 7, he's actually doing some really fantastic work in these incredible artistic movies. Then, because he's proven himself on the small scale, he is given the opportunity of doing Iron Man and Tony Stark. And as we all know now, he is born to be Tony Stark. He was born to play that role, and it's become this iconic thing. But to your point, what's so exciting about Oppenheimer is that it gave us an opportunity to see that side of him again that we had barely seen since he joined the MCU. And I think that's why for a lot of us it was disappointing that he went back, because during his Oscar speech, he was essentially saying, I'm done doing the Marvel
This
thing.
is the start of my new phase.
This is the start of a new phase for me. I want to do more things like this.
Yeah.
And then he just goes back to the MCU. So, I mean, maybe he'll be great as Doom. Maybe
I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will.
Know.
And I think it'll be short-lived. This is perhaps just, an exit off of a highway, this newly found phase of a highway. And this is just a pit stop. Playing Doom, so he'll probably get back to the Oppenheimers of the world once Secret Wars is done. At least I hope so.
And to be fair to him, that probably was the plan, to do more Oppenheimers. And then Marvel called and he said, "How much are you going to pay me?" Sign me up.
Yeah. Can't say no to that.
No one's going to turn down that ludicrous amount of money. So that's probably how that played out, I would imagine.
Oh, no, yeah.
At any
probably.
rate, it's an incredible comeback story, and he is now the king of Hollywood in many respects. So you can't deny it. It is just an undeniable comeback story.
One of the great movie stars. He really is.
Absolutely. In an era where there's few movie stars.
Yeah.
He is one of them.
He is.
He's still one of the few we have left, for sure.
Yeah. All right, so that was your number 2.
That was my number 2.
So do you want to go? You still have your number 3 left, right? You want to go right to that?
Yeah, I can go to my number 3. This is also a modern comeback. It is Keanu Reeves. I've Keanu Reeves at number 3 here.
Okay.
And Keanu is one of those Nicolas Cage types where he's this big star in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to the 2000s and things cool off. After a while, he had some big misses. It's not as if he wasn't working. He was in some big movies even throughout the 2000s, but a lot of them did not hit. And so he wasn't the bankable lead that he was in the 90s, despite the cult love that a lot of us had for him. Then in 2014, that all changes. That all changes completely with John Wick, which, again, I think is ironic because John Wick wasn't meant to be this huge, massive Hollywood comeback movie.
No,
it was a low-budget action
was
movie.
Kind of an accident. If anything, that first John Wick was kind of riding the high of a certain Hollywood epidemic, if you will, of making movies where you put a famous older actor in an action movie, give him a gun, and make a revenge story out of it. It's kind of another Taken or another Edge of Darkness.
Exactly.
It's very much in that formula.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when Liam Neeson was doing Taken, I don't think that he had any clue that film would hit the way that it did.
Yeah.
And it's, some of Nicolas Cage's independent work, some of them have blown up beyond anything he could have expected.
Sure.
John Travolta has done this a lot in recent years. None of them have really blown up in a John Wick kind of way, but generally he's been doing a lot of those low budget action movies.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of old, like 90s, 80s, 90s action stars have had, they've run into this, right? Where in their older days, they just do these low budget movies. Some of them blow up, some of them don't. John Wick was a low budget action film. They probably had no clue that it would blow up the way that it did, but it did. Right. It exploded, absolutely exploded. So he was back in a huge, huge way, was able to reinvent himself as this iconic action star. He was that already, but certainly was able to reinvent himself in a new way with John Wick. And it allowed him, and I think it opened up doors, like the new Matrix film that came out a few years ago. That doesn't really happen without John Wick. I mean, maybe it would, because we live in a world today where it's all about sequels and remakes and reboots.
It probably
maybe, but I think that mostly crystallizes because of the new fame he found as a result of
it. Definitely got rushed along more quickly because they had something to tie it to, something to back it up.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that movie is so underrated, Matrix Resurrections. I think it's quite good.
And especially when you couple it with the Wachowski sisters, by that time, their value had more or less tanked, right?
Yeah.
So I think that Matrix movie really only happens because of the Wick revival.
Yeah.
And obviously it went on to do pretty well. So Keanu Reeves, the way that he has relaunched himself in such a huge, huge way, like borderline Downey Jr. way, like this Wick franchise just will not die. Even though the character, spoiler alert, has been killed off.
Oh, they're still making a new one. Yeah.
He's still coming back. They're making they're John Wick 5. I don't know how. The character is dead.
I don't know, man. I think director Chad Stahelski, I think his name is, I think he is listening to the fans for John Wick Chapter 5. There have been a lot of people either theorizing or wanting at least a John Wick Bat Out of Hell like movie.
maybe that's what it'll be.
And Chad Stahelski has even said that Chapter 5 will be a very different and maybe even surprising story.
Yes, I did see those comments that it's going to maybe appropriately here, like reinvent the character in some sort of way. And of course, speaking of Wick as Wick, I guess, is going to be in Ballerina later this summer. So he is that character, and that character is everywhere now.
You talked about how Robert Downey Jr. was born to play Tony Stark, that he like spearheaded a franchise because of it. You don't have many opportunities, or you don't see many actors who get the opportunity to lead and spearhead 2 franchises that they were born to play. Keanu Reeves is one of them. He has 2. He has the Matrix films and the
chosen
John Wick
one
films.
for sure.
Yeah,
and he's also the boogeyman.
Well, and then if and when we finally get a Speed 3, we could say he was also
the Speed Man.
Yeah, born to play Jack.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that about Keanu Reeves. And that to me is another one of those. There are plenty of obvious modern picks for sure, but Downey Jr. and Reeves, because of the cultural impact and the zeitgeist and just how significant they've been, I think that's why they kind of stood above the rest. But there's clearly plenty of examples, but those are my 2 modern picks that I really love.
I think those are great choices. All right, so I guess we can go on to my number 2. You already gave your number 2.
Yeah, I gave my number 2 away.
So my number 2, I wouldn't be surprised if this is your number 1, just given how much you like this particular movie where this particular comeback occurred. But for my number 2, I'm going to go with Marlon Brando for The Godfather.
Yeah, this is another great honorable mention for me. This was close to being on my list. Yeah.
Okay. And the thing with this is that I guess I'm putting less weight on the comeback story this time and more weight on, I guess, the sheer just artistic representation here. That Marlon Brando for a while was, no pun intended, the Godfather of Hollywood. Just given the roles that he was in, the movies that he was starring in, and just how talented that he was, whether it be in A Streetcar Named Desire or On the Waterfront, whatever it might be.
Awesome movies.
Yeah, amazing movies. Much of his output in the 60s, wouldn't say was bad, did not match the success of what he was known for, to the point that he needed to prove something. And what does he do to prove that? He gives a performance that many people might say is one of the greatest performances of all time.
Yeah.
Like that's how you shut people up.
Exactly. Oh, you don't think I can do this? Oh,
yeah.
I got something for you.
Yeah. So that's why I feel like we need to at least acknowledge Marlon Brando. It just goes to show how powerful The Godfather itself is. So that's why it's my number 2. And much of what he would then do in the 70s, showcase the newly found movie stardom and the mystery around that movie stardom. Like a movie like Apocalypse Now was sold because of Marlon Brando, and he has such a brief and strange performance in it. But his shadow oversees the whole movie. It's so haunting because of that mysterious presence that you're just waiting to see. But Marlon Brando had that mysterious presence that made you want to see what it was all about. And that's honestly the sign of a great comeback, making that happen. So, yeah, Marlon Brando, I think, is one we have to talk about.
Yeah, no, that is a great pick. It's one I very, very much considered here as well. And I don't know, maybe falls a little bit into that John Travolta camp for me.
Mm-hmm.
I love it, though. I mean, I don't really have any other reasons to not pick it here. And I guess maybe if I was being like purely objective, it's probably in my 5, simply because that performance and how legendary it is, it's just undeniable. And he went on to have a fascinating career in the aftermath of that performance and the success of that as well.
I mean,
including being in Superman. Of course, there's Apocalypse Now, and that crazy little cameo he has there.
I love it.
Is incredible. So, yeah, but that's a big one. That's a big one. Top 10 for sure if we're expanding this out.
Absolutely. So that was my number 2. You already revealed your number 2 because we had Robert Downey Jr. as a crossover there. So we're at our number 1s. Should I go ahead and take this one and then you'll go to yours?
Yep. Go ahead. What do you got?
That'd be fun if we have some crossover here. I didn't really expect to have this one all the way at number 1, but I think the historical ramifications of this comeback are ones that we need to also acknowledge, especially given the trajectory of Hollywood. My number one is Gloria Swanson for Sunset Boulevard.
The comeback that defines comebacks.
Yeah.
It is the number one. Sometimes the best one is the most obvious one, but
this is the most obvious one. It really is.
This topic begins and ends with Gloria Swanson. 100%.
It absolutely does. So I'm glad we agree on this. Yeah. But a lot of it does come down to the circumstances of how difficult it was for many actors, directors to make the transition from silent films into the talkies. It was a really hard game for a lot of them, and many of them did struggle. In some cases, some of them struggled so hard they just refused to play the game, like Charlie Chaplin. And now his films are revered for that, just by, refusing to compromise. But Gloria Swanson is someone that really did struggle in the 1930s and really sort of left the spotlight for what I guess was a full decade, if I'm not mistaken. And she makes this return in Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard. And it's not just the return itself that makes it such a great comeback and how good her performance is. I feel like this is one of the earliest examples of meta performance, or just meta interpretation of film in film. Like, we see that a lot with many movies nowadays. They go meta, or as Dewey says in Scream 4, how whata can you get? But in many ways, like, Sunset Boulevard was one of the very first examples of being so self-referential and self-aware. And her performance, Gloria Swanson's performance, is very much the epitome of that. In a way, she's kind of playing, I don't want to say a version of herself, but maybe a version of what she may have gone through. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. There is something very real about that. And again, we weren't alive in the 1950s to know for sure how many movies were very self-aware in doing this thing, but I can't imagine it was that often. So just the sheer audacity to be that self-aware, and how self-aware her performance is, the bravery of what she had to go through in making that transition is astounding. So I feel like that's why this conversation begins and ends with her.
100%. Absolutely. I think those meta components is why that performance is so deeply haunting and powerful. I'm sure it's not 100% verbatim, but there's absolutely a truth to her being this silent era star that faded when the talkies came into the picture, into the moving picture, if you will.
Yeah.
And how that film tells that story exactly. Of course, there was a lot for her to relate with, and it comes through absolutely glorious, if you will.
Gloria Swanson Lee. Yeah.
It is so good. Yeah. I mean, it is the definition of the comeback.
Yeah.
It is absolutely incredible. Easily my number one. There was no other choice for me when it comes to actor comebacks. And I mean, part of it is the poetry of how it mirrors her story and how meta it is. And to get that kind of performance out of her, incredible. Absolutely stunning.
I love it.
And I mean, and that was what, 25 years removed from her most prominent work. I mean, she was away from Hollywood for a long time. I mean, she had been doing some stuff, not really a lot though.
There were a lot of flops in there though. I mean, a lot of critical flops, and that transition from the silent film era was very challenging for her.
Very, very challenging. I mean, she worked a lot up until about 1934. And then had, I think, one other film in there in the 40s. And then she gets Sunset Boulevard. Crazy.
I love it.
Astounding.
Love that story.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So, Gloria Swanson, easily my number one here as well. Honorable mentions. What do you got for honorable mentions?
I will say my number 6, if I were to rank the rest of these, and I almost tried to make room for her, my number 6 would have been Pamela Anderson. Especially for The Last Showgirl, and just the sheer surprise of her giving a performance like that, and also us finally taking notice just how film literate that she is. Like, if you see that small video of her exploring the Criterion Closet, it's really, really amazing to watch. I think the reason why I didn't quite have her in my top 5 is that it's still very early in her comeback story. We're going to see her later this year in the Naked Gun reboot, and I'm looking forward to that. But I think there's more I need to see before we justify putting her in one of the greatest comebacks yet.
Yeah.
So it's still very early. But nonetheless, there's a story there that I think really is worth acknowledging. I think she deserves to be recognized for that reason. Demi Moore is another one we can also recognize for very similar reasons as well.
On my list as well, yeah.
Let's see, Ke Huy Quan, especially for Everything Everywhere All at Once, a very little comeback once again.
Yep, same.
Michael Keaton for Birdman specifically, very, I guess in kind of a similar way to Gloria Swanson for Sunset Boulevard. Michael Keaton never really went away, but his performance in Birdman is kind of self-aware, self-referential in a way, in a very similar way.
But did bring him back to the zeitgeist in a huge way at that time, for sure.
Then is in movies like Spotlight right afterwards, to the point that he basically, he not even basically, he became Batman again for a brief moment.
Literally, he became Batman again.
Yeah,
crazy.
I guess I say
circle.
Basically because he technically became Batman for 2 films. One of those films is still not released, sadly, but maybe we'll finally get it given some of the news that's going on with Warner Brothers nowadays. So that's another honorable mention for me. I also have Eddie Murphy, specifically for Dolomite Is My Name. I also consider Ben Affleck, especially a comeback for him as a director. Which
I did too. Like I almost texted you to ask about Affleck.
Yeah,
because I wasn't exactly sure where he fits in here. Because I would argue most of his, like a lot of his comeback is fueled by his directing more so than him as an actor.
I agree.
We were considering this an actor comeback exercise. But I think in some ways the two are hand in hand. Like his performances, I think, improved. And he's talked about this a lot in interviews, that performatively he's become a better actor since becoming a director and being able to look at acting from that perspective. And I think that does show. Like I think since becoming an actor, and perhaps you can point to Argo, because that was his second feature film, I believe.
His third, actually.
His third. But that was the first of his that he was in. No, he was in The Town. He was in The Town. So I guess you could go back to The Town performatively and look at his career as an actor and go, yeah, there's a difference there from his career from The Town onward to what it was previously. And he was a fine actor beforehand, but I do think there's a new level to him performatively since becoming a director as well.
Yeah, but there was still a bit of a line to try to decipher whether it really did qualify for this list that I was still wrestling with.
I agree. I wrestled with it as well.
Yeah, now if we were to make this a bit of a broader comeback story, then I think we could have easily made room for him more appropriately. But nonetheless, I think we need to acknowledge him because, as you said, his acting did improve, and we've become more aware of his talents as an actor because of his talents as a director. There is a link there. They are intertwined. So Ben Affleck there, great honorable mention for me. Mickey Rourke for The Wrestler. Not really a very long-lived success, but briefly a good comeback for a little while.
For sure.
Renee Zellweger, who took a 6-year break for a while before coming back to certain films like Bridget Jones, and then also going on to win an Oscar for Judy. So a little bit of a comeback there. Sylvester Stallone, I think you can also throw into the conversation as well. Matthew McConaughey is another great one who kind of coined the actor assance term that we tend to associate. So in many ways, we have to acknowledge him for inadvertently trademarking that thing. So those are my honorable mentions right now. And like I did say earlier in this conversation, Nicolas Cage, Adam Sandler, I mentioned them earlier, still great honorable mentions for me.
Yeah. If I had to expand this out to a 10, I don't know exactly what the ranking would be from 6 to 10, but I do think the 5 would be some combination of Nicolas Cage, as I mentioned earlier, Brando, as I mentioned earlier, Matthew McConaughey's comeback, that renaissance for him, truly remarkable.
It's great.
Really, really incredible stuff. And I still think we're feeling the after effects of that even today.
Yeah.
So I do want to acknowledge McConaughey. That would absolutely be in my 10. Judy Garland would be another one for me with A Star Is Born.
Good choice.
Her coming back, and it's a Brendan Fraser kind of tragedy, but then comes back and is able to do that movie. Yeah. And then my Tarantino choice would be Robert Forster, who
that's a great choice.
Goes away
that
for
is
a while.
Great choice.
and then comes back for Jackie Brown and has his huge comeback there. And I believe he was
Oscar nominated for it.
Oscar
Yeah, he was.
nominated,
Yeah, sadly, the only Oscar nomination that movie received. That's such a
Crazy.
crime. Such a crime. But again, that's kind of another great example of another one you talked about earlier. And forgive me, I forget. Oh, I guess it was Fred Astaire when you talked about Fred Astaire. Given the artistic shift that he made going from musicals and dancing to the Towering Inferno.
Exactly.
But Robert Forster was kind of known for more B-level movies in a way, kind of gritty, sometimes horror films. So Jackie Brown was a very different kind of thing for him. And Tarantino saw the talent there.
So yeah, he is good about. There is something there with Tarantino that it might be one of his most underrated things, because even most recently, there's been a lot of discourse around the cast to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. All of the girls that he cast there for those sequences on the ranch, they've all become huge in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
They've all had their moments in the spotlight and have these thriving franchise or thriving careers.
He was onto something with that Manson family, man.
He really was. But he
not just the girls, but Austin Butler as well.
Yeah. I mean, the casting of his films throughout his entire career have been incredible, like elite, like underratedly one of the best qualities to Tarantino.
He knows what to look for. He knows.
Yes.
He's got it. He gets it.
I agree. Among beyond those five, though, you laid out a lot of my other honorable mentions. Excuse me, because I also had Fraser, Rourke, Keaton, Ke Quan, Demi Moore, Eddie Murphy, Affleck. Also, Betty Davis, I think, qualifies here. Joan Crawford, Frank Sinatra, I think, is another good one. Ingmar Bergman and Katharine Hepburn sort of qualify. They're a little bit. They're one of those like Zellweger that you brought up, where there's like a 6, 7, 8 year period where they just disappeared. Like just their movies just tanked, and so they just weren't in the conversation all that much. And then had these career turning movies that were huge. Yeah, but I don't think the narrative there is quite as strong, but good enough for honorable mentions.
I think so. I think so. List. And of course, Josh Hartnett, who inspired this list. Of course, another great.
We got to label Josh Hartnett as well. All right, those are our top 5 actor comebacks. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit us up. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can always email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com, but we would love to hear from you. What are your top 5 actor comebacks? We would love to see your list.
Absolutely.
All right. As we wind down the show this week, we have a couple of reviews that we are going to talk about. One of them is the aforementioned Fight or Flight with Josh Hartnett. Have you seen the film yet, Brendan?
I have not. I have not seen it yet.
Okay. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, I do and I don't.
That means I'm excited now.
Yeah. I mean, there's the walking out of the theater feeling that I had, and also am I overthinking it a little too much as well? Like there's that's the duality I'm kind of battling, but
I'll be seeing it tomorrow. I'll be seeing it tomorrow.
Yeah. We'll see how that conversation goes. And then we're also going to be talking about a film titled On Becoming a Guinea Fowl. This is a film that, if I'm not mistaken, competed at Cannes last year and got a United States release like a month ago or so, maybe 2 months ago. It was released by A24. It is recently out on digital. And there's going to be plenty to talk about with that film.
I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to that one.
Really good. So I do look forward to talking about On Becoming a Guinea Fowl. You can be on the lookout for that as well. There will be a new woman in session later on in the week. As always, stay tuned. InSessionFilm.com. Dave and his incredible group of writers, they will have plenty throughout the week as well there. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here? Am I missing anything?
I will say this. You highlighted Dave and the great work that he does managing all of our great writers over at InSessionFilm.com, but I also want to highlight Dave as a really talented writer. He has a new piece over at Awards Watch addressing how May, the month of May, is Mental Health Awareness Month, and his experience with that. So I urge everyone to go over to Awards Watch and check that out. It's a really wonderful piece and a very vulnerable piece as well that we have to give him some credit for.
Absolutely. Fantastic stuff. Dave always does phenomenal work.
Yeah.
I would encourage checking out anything that he writes, whether it be for us at InSessionFilm.com or others. He's really great. That piece in particular is phenomenal. I very much do agree. It's really, really great, deeply poignant. Go and check that out at Awards Watch as well. I agree with Brendan there. All right. With all of that said, really looking forward to the reviews this week. I get to see Final Reckoning Monday. Today, as this episode is released.
I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on that one.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we are maybe not in the majority when it comes to our feelings on Dead Reckoning.
Nope. I'd say I'm very much on the outside looking in as far as that film goes. Maybe we could talk about it in some bonus content. Who knows?
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Stay on the lookout for all of that. Again, we will have more Patreon. We'll have more bonus content. We are going to address that. So sign up, become an InSession Film VIP listener. We're going to have some more stuff coming down the pipeline very, very soon. With all of that said, thanks everybody for your support. Thanks for listening, watching, and we will see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Gloria Swanson.
Happy Mother's Day.
Performance.